We
are
cultivate.
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 We are cultivate.
Hello and welcome to Ye Olde Crime, where we discuss the funny, strange, and obscure crimes of yesteryear. I'm your host, Lindsay Valenti, and with me is my sister and co-host, Maddie Stengel.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. Before we go too far, I do want to announce that we will be having a sale at our TeePublic shop this week.
Ooh.
From September 11th through the 15th. If you would like to enjoy 35% off everything in our store, we encourage you to click the link in the show notes that will take you to our TeePublic shop.
Nice.
So today, we are going to be discussing Hannah Courtoy and the Brompton Cemetery time machine.
Okay. This could be a lot of things. I'm intrigued.
Information was pulled from the following sources: a 2024 Mental Floss article by Jake Rawson, 2021 Habitats and Heritage post by Stephen Fielding, 2020 Curiosities from the Fifth Corner post by Tamsin Wild, 2020 The Serpent's Pen post by David Castleton, 2019 Exploring London post, 2015 Independent article by Richard Ginman, 2014 English Historical Fiction post by David Godson, 1998 Daily News article by Helen Smith, Atlas Obscura, 2 Find a Grave listings, Genie, 2 The Royal Parks web pages, and Wikipedia.
Nice.
And thank you, as always, to Carrie Ann for her research assistance for this episode. And links to all of these articles will be included in the show notes. We wouldn't be here without support from listeners like you. If you're interested in supporting us financially, you can leave a one-time or monthly donation over on Buy Me a Coffee or our Venmo page. Links are in the show notes. And we make a point of reaching out to send you a thank you note and stickers to show our appreciation.
Want to show your support in a more concrete way? Pick up some Ye Olde Crime merch over at our TeePublic shop. We shout out whenever there is a sale each month, and we work to make sure we're creating new designs and changing it up whenever possible. And hey, thanks for listening.
Hannah Courtoy was born Hannah Peters on August 21st, 1781, in St. James, in the city of Westminster in London, England.
Okay.
It's always the longest things in London. Like, they've got to have 1,000,001 names.
Yeah. Like the before and after, and over there to the right.
Yep. Hannah was the daughter of John and Mary Peters and was the second eldest of their 10 children.
Dang.
Her siblings include Anne Austen, who was born in 1779, John Jr., born 1816, James, born 1824, Susan, born 1830, Henry, born 1836, then Catherine, Charles, and George W., and Mary, whose birth years were anywhere between 1807 and 1845. So,
Oh my gosh.
who knows?
That's crazy.
Yeah. I love when you see that on genie.com. It's like, they could have been born anytime between these 50 years. It's like, cool.
Great. So we just know that they existed.
Yes.
Cool.
And of course, there's no death date. It's just
No,
at
never.
some point during this span of time, they were born.
and there was that one that was there roughly around then.
They were all listed between 1807 and 1845. So I was like, okay.
Interesting.
We'll go with it. Hannah's father was drunk and abusive.
Great.
She fled her home at the age of 18 in 1799. Thanks to help from her older sister Anne, she found employment working for Charles Prince Boothby as a scullion.
What's that?
What is a scullion? A servant assigned the most menial of kitchen tasks.
Ouch. But she was out. She was out of that abusive
Yes.
situation.
So she was a kitchen maid.
I'd do it too.
Yeah. Charles was known as a chronic gambler and womanizer.
Perfect. Transition. She's just really getting the best of all male spectrum.
Mm-hmm. Yep. All the best.
The pendulum's real slow.
Yeah, it's not
in
swinging
her
very far.
exposure.
Just a year later, in 1800, he completed suicide after incurring an overwhelming amount of debt.
Oh my. It must have been a really large number for him to do that.
So Hannah had to seek employment elsewhere for obvious
Yeah.
reasons,
Yep.
and she worked at a tavern first to support herself.
Yeah, I bet there's probably some nobody wants to hire you yet because they don't know if you killed him.
Yeah.
Or like the shame of being associated with them had to wear down a little bit.
In 1801, at the age of 20, a friend named Frances Grasso introduced her to John Courtly, who had been a wig maker in his youth, but was enjoying his fortune after working in the lending business.
Okay, so the pendulum is swinging a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Here's where the French comes in. Nicolas Jean Jacquenet de Courty, aka John, was born on August 25th, 1729, in Jussy, France.
Nice.
Jussy. I'm probably saying that wrong. But he arrived in London in 1752 at the age of 23 and lived and worked as a wig maker and hairdresser in Oxenden Street near Leicester Square.
Okay.
In 1777, he began a relationship with Mary Ann Woolley, who was 20 years his junior.
Ew.
Although the couple would never marry.
Still.
They had 4 children together. John Joseph William in 1777, so the year they began their relationship. George the following year in 1778. Louisa Ann in 1784, and John Jr. in 1789. Although John Jr. would pass away just a few years later in 1792 at the age of 3.
Oh.
It didn't list why, but it was probably any of the number of fevers and diseases that circulate through London throughout this period in history. His relationship with Mary would eventually fizzle out, but he would remain involved in his children's lives for several years following their separation.
That's honestly impressive for the time.
So John became reserved and antisocial following a violent encounter he had with a sex worker in 1795, during which he had been slashed at with a knife. And it was unclear if, he was using the services of the sex worker when he was attacked, or if he was just randomly attacked by a sex worker while out and about. It's unclear, just that he was attacked with a knife by a sex worker. And it, left a very lasting impression on him.
Interesting.
In 1799, at the age of 70, John was granted denization so he could own land in the UK.
Okay, that's a big deal.
And denization was much cheaper at this period in time than naturalization, which would require an act of parliament. So it was cheaper to just own land than it was to become a citizen.
That's crazy.
John employed Hannah as a housekeeper when he was 71. And within a year, Hannah gave birth to daughter Mary, who was born on December 11th, 1801. Now, before you get scandalized, it is believed that all 3 of Hannah's children, including Elizabeth, who was born on October 5th, 1803, and Susanna, who was born on October 4th, 1806, that they were fathered by Frances, who had introduced Hannah to John. But even still, Hannah gave all 3 of them the surname of Courtly. They were all baptized with that last name.
Interesting. Like they would have a better life with that name, so that's why they chose it.
Hannah also took the name of Courtly, and it has been noted that she and John were married in a non-Christian ceremony, which meant that their relationship would not be recognized under English law as legitimate. But I don't personally think that's true. I do believe that he did trust her, and
Mhm.
perhaps that is why he allowed her to take his last name and to have her children baptized with his name as well.
Maybe he was kind of letting her do this a similar sidestep, like when he did the denizen thing, like
Mm-hmm.
common law. Like you are existing in my
Yeah.
home that I own, therefore
Mm-hmm.
what's mine is yours, maybe. And kind of doing it more as like a weird platonic.
Yeah. And maybe also to kind of remove any sort of scandal that could possibly be tied to him, having an unmarried
With
housekeeper
children.
who also has children out of
Yeah.
wedlock.
That are young.
So I don't know. I mean, I still think it would be weird to have a 20-year-old woman married to a 71-year-old man,
Mhm.
but you know, whatever.
The more we talk about it, I think it's pretty clear that it was just to help her out, I think, on paper.
Not to say that it's not possible
Right.
that a 73-year-old man could impregnate a woman, but I really don't think they had that type of relationship.
Yeah. So far it's not really in their MOs, even though we don't really know much
Yeah.
about them.
In 1810, John drafted a new last will and testament in
Oh,
which he left the bulk of his fortune to Mary Ann Woolley and her children, so his biological children.
okay.
However, just 4 years later, at which point John would have been 84, a
Hmm.
second will was drafted that effectively
Oh,
Uno
no.
reversed the previous one,
Stop.
instead naming Hannah and her daughters as the principal beneficiaries.
Oh, no.
Now, I mentioned before that he had a considerable amount of money.
Hmm.
He had money in a number of institutions, including the Bank of England, the British Library, Barclays Bank, Manchester, and the Royal Bank of Scotland, London. Newspapers described him as a quote unquote miser,
Oh,
and one even noted that his fortune was £239,000 or 25.7 million pounds today.
just sprinkled everywhere.
Yeah, just kind of like
Just sitting.
randomly deposited in some small amounts around London, essentially.
Weird. That's one way to secure your money, I guess.
I guess. John passed away at home on December 8th, 1818, at the age of 88. He was originally
Oh.
interred in the portico vault of St. Martin in the Fields on December 16th, 1818. And when his will went into probate on January 7th, 1819, it was valued between 200,000 and 250,000 pounds, or 21.5 million to 27 million today.
Wow.
The Woolies and John's French relatives contested the validity of John's 1814 will against the original that had been drafted in 1810.
I bet they did.
In journals written by a woman named Maureen Sayers, who was briefly employed by John from July 1817 until January 1818, so like right before he got too sick and passed
Hmm.
away, she noted that he was suffering from some form of dementia.
Oh, no.
And they didn't quite go into specifics of what type of dementia and how bad it was.
Yeah.
The dispute over John's will would go on until 1827, but Hannah and her daughters received a significant portion of his wealth initially, with the remainder going to his first family and his French relatives.
That's crazy.
Hannah began to live a lavish lifestyle,
Hmm.
indulging in her passions around Egyptology.
Interesting.
She began a friendship with Joseph Bonamy prior to John's death. It's been implied that they were romantically involved, but I only saw that in one
Who
source.
knows? Yeah.
So, Joseph was among the first to decipher a number of the hieroglyphs in the Valley of the Kings.
Interesting. That would be a very fun person to meet.
Joseph Bonamy the Younger, whose father was an Italian immigrant, was born in London in 1796. His father, Joseph the Elder, gained popularity for his skills as an architect and draftsman in addition to his skills as a designer of country homes. And Joseph the Younger's eldest brother, Ignatius, also took up the family trade and was a noted architect.
What a spectrum of names.
I know,
Joseph
right?
and Ignatius.
Mm-hmm. Joseph studied at the Royal Academy and traveled to Rome in 1822 to further his education before quickly finding himself in debt after just a few months.
That's not good.
He was then invited by Egyptologist and Scottish antiquarian Robert Hay to join him on an expedition to Egypt, for which he would
Really?
give him a modest salary.
That's lucky.
And that's where Joseph's lifelong interest in Egypt began.
Okay.
During his time in Egypt, he illustrated a number of works, and upon returning to England, used his architectural chops at a number of sites around the country, such as the Egyptian facade at the Temple Works Flax Mill in Leeds, and he also co-designed the entrance to Abney Park Cemetery to ensure that the Egyptian hieroglyphs accurately proclaimed the graveyard as, quote, the abode of the mortal part of man, end quote.
So it wouldn't be like a botched translation,
Yeah.
gibberish nightmare.
Joseph regaled Hannah with stories surrounding the iconography of Egypt, astrology, and also his supposed dealings with the occult, which, I mean, when it comes
Of
to
course.
Egyptology, there's always some
Yeah.
occult leanings. They would spend hours discussing Egyptian lore, and Hannah expressed an interest in funding one of Joseph's expeditions.
Hmm.
The pair also arranged the construction of a 175-foot tall monument in the style of an Egyptian obelisk dedicated to the Duke of Wellington.
Damn. Okay.
Joseph introduced Hannah to a man named Samuel Alfred Warner, whose inventions include the torpedo
Really?
and an invisible shell described as, quote, a bomb that could be teleported a short distance, a kind of psychic torpedo, end quote.
Okay, I don't believe that one, but sure.
Yeah. Samuel Warner was born in Heathfield, East Sussex in 1793. His carpenter father, William, was rumored to have dealings with smuggling, but that is
Hmm.
about the extent of what we really know of his childhood.
Okay.
In 1819, he was working with a London chemist on explosives and spent time working for King Pedro I of Brazil and King William IV after claiming that he had invented top secret weapons.
Hmm.
It was in 1830 that he began promoting his two miracle inventions, the invisible shell and the long range. The invisible shell was said to be a highly explosive underwater mine, quote, no bigger than a duck's egg, end quote.
Okay.
And the long range was essentially a balloon that dropped his invisible shells automatically.
Oh, okay.
So kind of like a hot air balloon, but then it would drop missiles or these little torpedo things.
Yeah, okay, that's not gonna work, but sure.
Yeah.
I can see why we haven't really heard about it.
Yes. The Prime Minister, Sir Robert Peel, was present when Samuel conducted a demonstration on an Essex lake that blew up a boat. So he
Oh,
successfully blew up a boat. Interest in his inventions intrigued the British Navy so much that they allowed him to blow up boats in the English Channel in 1844.
dang. That's a test.
So they wanted to hire him to make weapons,
Mm-hmm.
which makes sense. But he was
Mm-hmm.
like, I'll do it, but you have to pay me an absurd amount of money, and I will not share the plans with you.
Sounds like a weapons maker.
And they were like, no. You must be a
No.
charlatan then. So
Yeah.
that's kind of how he was viewed.
Yeah. Like, how would yeah, I mean the whole invisible thing too, like
Yeah.
it'd be tough to be like, "Oh, sure, you're not full of
Yep.
shit."
Samuel would go on to die quite suddenly and mysteriously in December of 1853, leaving behind a wife and 7 children. And he was also buried in an unmarked grave.
Oh, that's not good. So he had more than one enemy in life.
Yeah,
If he had an unmarked grave.
I think so.
Ugh.
Hannah also became close friends with Mistress Sarah R. Wood Kent Smith, who was a known New England clairvoyant, medium, and occultist.
Hmm.
Sarah was born December 29th, 1797, in Danby, Vermont, to parents Seth Wood Jr. and Mary Polly Briggs. She had 4 older siblings and 8 younger siblings.
Oh my God.
That's a lot of kids.
That's a baker's dozen worth of kids.
Yeah. Sarah was passionately interested in Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Babylon, and was even able to trace her lineage all the way back to each of those empires.
Nice. That's impressive,
Yeah.
especially during that time.
She was well traveled, having lived in several different cities throughout the US and Canada, and was regularly consulted for her services as a medium. So you can kind of see why Hannah would
Hmm.
be interested in being her friend.
Yeah.
She would get married twice, and over the course of both marriages gave birth to 11 children.
Dang. So she was just as busy as her mom.
Mm-hmm.
And like just as like this is gonna sound horrible, but like structurally sound. So
Yes.
having so many children, I don't know if my body would be capable of that. Like that's really impressive that you're able to
Yeah.
have so many healthy babies. Like that's
Yeah.
amazing.
She was definitely born of a sturdy stock. We'll just say that.
Yeah. Wow.
Additionally, she would live to the age of 83, passing
Wow.
away on March 14th, 1881, in Lunenburg, Vermont, where she is interred at Riverside Cemetery.
Hmm.
Hannah's eldest daughters, Mary and Elizabeth, never married because they worried that the men who took interest in them were only after them for their fortunes.
That would be hard. I think, especially in the world that their mom was kind of immersed in, I'm sure they've seen their fair share of like snake oil salesmen.
Hannah passed away at home at 14 Wilton Crescent, Belgrave Square, on January 26, 1849. She was 67 at the time of her death, and she lived in one of the wealthiest areas of London at the time.
Dang.
There were a couple reports stating that she passed away from cholera or the plague, but I didn't find anything to verify that claim. That was just 2 known illnesses that were taking out a lot of people during that
Yeah,
time.
it was just one of the two likely scenarios.
Hannah's mausoleum is located in West London's Brompton Cemetery, in one of the magnificent 7 Victorian cemeteries.
Hmm.
The others include Kensal Green, which opened in 1833, West Norwood, which opened in 1837, Highgate, which opened in 1839, Abney Park, which opened in 1840, Nunhead, which opened in 1840, and Tower Hamlets, which opened in 1841. Brompton Cemetery is home to 200,000 souls, in addition to
Wow.
Hannah, and is also the final resting place for other famous people, such as Dr. John Snow, who discovered that cholera is spread through tainted water. We've discussed him in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And Emmeline Pankhurst, who led the suffragettes movement.
Crazy.
Brompton Cemetery itself is one of the oldest Victorian garden cemeteries, founded in 1840 by Stephen Geary, who was an inventor and entrepreneur in addition to being an architect. Benjamin Bod was credited with creating a tree-lined open-air cathedral, and J.C. Loudon was charged with the landscaping. One thing I should probably illustrate as best I can audibly for our listeners is, so these cemeteries that were constructed during the Victorian era were designed to be places that you would visit.
Like a park, like a beautiful
Yes.
botanical garden, or
Yes.
like a place with a koi pond and like
Yes.
things to see aside from your loved ones.
Like these were places that you would go, you would like sit next to your loved one's tomb or headstone and you would have like a picnic lunch. These are places where even if you didn't have anybody that you knew buried there, you would go and just like walk around, admire the architecture, admire the scenery, the gardens that were there. Like these were places that you would visit for more than just to pay your respects. Like they were places that you would actively go to on a regular basis.
It's crazy. It's crazy to think about, like how they would essentially kind of cover up the fact that it's a cemetery
Mm-hmm.
in the most Victorian-esque way,
Mm-hmm.
which is let's put a doily on it.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Let's put a flower on it.
Let's make this very beautiful, a place that you want to hang out in and
Mhm.
not just drive up. It's very somber and very sad and then leave.
Yep.
Like this is a place that you want to stay a while. Now that I've painted that picture, the Courtoy Mausoleum, which took 4 years to build and was finished in March 1852, stands at 20 feet tall, topped by a pyramid peak in Brompton Cemetery, circle number 3.
Okay.
The structure is constructed from polished granite and has a heavy bronze door with a keyhole that prevents entry. Doubly so considering the key to open it has been lost since like the 1970s.
Oh no.
Covered in decorative accents, the door has a rectangular band around it covered in Egyptian hieroglyphs.
It's pretty cool.
The Courtoy Mausoleum is the largest and most elaborate structure in Brompton Cemetery.
Sounds like it.
It's believed to have been designed by Joseph Bonamy, so her friend.
Oh.
The Egyptian iconography that decorates the tomb, including scarab beetles, which are a symbol of eternal life,
Mhm.
are supposed to symbolize his involvement, which would make sense
Yeah.
considering their close friendship. The emblem on the tomb lists the initials MHENC that represents Mary, Hannah, and Elizabeth Courtoy. This denotes not only the 3 people who occupy the mausoleum, but also how they are placed in the tomb.
Oh.
So Mary rests on the left of the door, having passed on January 5th, 1868, at the age of 66. And she was interred in the mausoleum on January 16th of that same year.
Okay.
Hannah, so the matriarch, is
Mhm.
located in the far back center, having been interred on February 13th, 1849. So she actually was kind of in stasis somewhere else.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, ready to have her.
Yeah, so she was interred somewhere else for like 3 years before they
Mhm.
could put her in there. And Elizabeth's coffin is located at the right of the door when she passed away on August 31st, 1876, at the age of 72. And she was interred in the mausoleum on September 7th of 1876.
Hmm.
Now, Hannah's youngest daughter, Susanna, actually got married to a man named Septimus Holmes Godson in
Okay.
1830.
He sounds
Oh,
not real.
I know. He sounds like a wizarding spell.
Right. Like, what is with this family? The strange things.
So they got married in 1830 when he was 31 and she was 24. So not that big.
Oh.
I mean, it's still a pretty
Yeah.
big age gap. The couple didn't have any children, and Susanna passed away on January 11th, 1895, at the age of 88. She is buried in the same plot as her husband, who passed away in 1877, and they are also interred at Brompton Cemetery. So they are in the same cemetery as her mother and her siblings, but they're just not in the same plot.
Mm.
So, what makes the Courtoy Mausoleum so unique? Because people believe it's a time machine. So we're gonna go into that now.
Oh man.
So in order to understand where this crazy idea came from, I need to give you some context. So during this time in history, Egyptology was all the rage in Victorian society.
Oh yeah.
If you'll recall our episode about mummy medicine, like this was
Mm-hmm.
the era of everything Egypt being a symbol of prestige. Like
Mm-hmm.
ever since Napoleon invaded Egypt, interest in its history and architecture like influenced a whole lot of Victorian life.
Yeah.
The Victorians believed that the ancient Egyptians had cracked the code on time travel. I don't know why. And it's even theorized that part of the reason that the Courtoy Mausoleum took so long to construct, because it took 4 years, was due in part to the fact that Joseph had some involvement in its
Mm.
construction. So many people believed that Joseph had discovered the secret of time travel during his expeditions in Egypt. And he employed that knowledge upon his return to London as he assisted in the construction of the Courtoy Mausoleum.
Got it.
And, as an aside, Joseph was once curator of Sir John Soane's museum, and he was also made famous for arranging the Egyptian exhibits at the British Museum and at the Crystal Palace. So, like, he knows what he's doing when it comes to anything Egyptian. Like,
Mm-hmm.
he's the guy.
He's the guy to go to.
No records can be found regarding the mausoleum's construction. No plans,
That's
permits,
weird.
nothing. This is extremely unusual, and
Mm-hmm.
the intrigue grows when we consider that Joseph's own grave is in close proximity to Courtoy tomb, and his marker includes a hieroglyph that features the god Anubis straddling a structure that very closely resembles that of Courtoy and the Kilmorey mausoleums.
Interesting.
The Kilmorey mausoleums look very similar to hers,
Mm.
like strikingly so.
Okay.
Now, all 4 sides of the tomb have a large circular hole in the top that contains what looks to be like a glass orb.
Okay.
And these orbs are surrounded by 8 smaller holes, which leads some to believe that they were originally used to be like a clock,
Mm-hmm.
while others believe that the orbs are crystals that harness the power of the sun to power the time machine.
There you go. Or the moon.
Or the moon.
Mm-hmm.
There's also a bunch of these little like wagon wheel looking type things on the bottom of each of the sides of the tomb.
Mm-hmm.
People say that has some sort of significance, but other people are like, it's more likely that they were there to like vent the decomposition vapors so nothing explodes
Yeah.
in the mausoleum. I didn't really mention them just because I kind of felt the same way. Like there's a reason they're at the very base of each of the walls.
Yep.
I mean, but there's another theory regarding the fact that the tomb is located on a crossroads.
Ooh.
So multiple religions and belief systems, such as those in Greek and Roman mythology, Slavic paganism,
Mm-hmm.
have a long and storied history of viewing crossroads as places of power and magic. Crossroads have been viewed as portals to other realms, times, and are considered great points of energy. For those who believe in the thinning of the veil between worlds, crossroads are said to be areas where the veil is thinnest.
Mm-hmm. I always think of like the devil meeting you at the crossroads so you can make a deal with him.
So, one aspect of crossroads that goes against this theory is the fact that burials on or under a crossroads are typically reserved for people who are exceptionally evil, as it's said that when their soul rises from the dead, they will be confused as to which way they are supposed to go.
Mm. Interesting.
And historically, it has also for a long time been the sites of gibbets and gallows, as well as the burial place for those who had completed suicide.
Oh.
So typically, it wouldn't be considered a lucky place to be buried. It would be considered
Right.
a very unlucky place to be buried.
Mm-hmm. A place to be buried and forgotten.
Or to be buried so that you can't easily find your way to the afterlife or wherever.
Mm-hmm.
wherever your soul is supposed to go. Others believe that the mausoleum isn't a time machine, but instead a teleportation device. The belief in this likely has to do with the other person who was in charge of the construction of the mausoleum, Samuel.
Okay.
Now, some believe that instead of being a time machine, because of his involvement, it's more likely that the Courtey Mausoleum and others within the Magnificent Seven cemeteries are part of a network of teleportation chambers.
Mm.
The 7 cemeteries that make up the Magnificent Seven essentially create a ring around central London. And then there's an 8th mausoleum similar to those of Courtey and Kilmory in Paris in the Montmartre Cemetery,
Mm-hmm.
which causes some supporters of the teleportation theory to believe it was a way to travel not only quickly across London, but also across the Channel and back.
Because when you're dead, you want to go to Paris sometimes. You're so bored of London. Visit your buddies.
One long-held theory is that Joseph and Samuel asked Hannah to finance their project to build a time machine using the mausoleum as a clever shell to disguise the machine's true nature, given that cemeteries very rarely change over the course of centuries. Like,
Mm-hmm.
for the
It's
most
true.
part, if a cemetery's there, like nothing's going to be done to it. It's going to be there.
Yep.
I mean, there's your rare cases where people get dug up and moved, like we've
Mm-hmm.
covered in the past, but like quite a bit of scandal and rumor surrounds Samuel. So, like,
Mm-hmm.
if you'll remember, he passed away 5 years after Hannah did. This wasn't very long after the mausoleum was completed.
Interesting.
And there's 3 rumors that have survived surrounding his death.
Okay.
One, that Joseph killed him to prevent him from sharing their secrets.
Okay.
2, that he was killed for his supposed involvement with the Navy in regards to creating ammunition for them for when he was making torpedoes.
Okay.
And 3, that he never actually died, but instead has become lost in space and time. And that's why he has an unmarked grave.
That would suck. That would be the saddest one. Is he he yeeted himself out of his general existence out of curiosity.
And I wanted to include this because I felt so bad for him. So John,
Mm-hmm.
the original Courtey, his remains would be moved 2 more times. So in 1831, they were moved to Catacomb B, and in 1859, the 5 vaults in that catacomb were quote-unquote permanently sealed.
Mm.
But then, in 1938, the vaults were cleared to make more room, so no one knows where his remains are now.
Oh,
So, which I think is really sad.
that is sad.
In regards to the Courtey Mausoleum and the time machine theory,
Mm-hmm.
modern interest cropped up in October of 1998 thanks to Associated Press reporter Helen Smith.
Of course.
During Halloween of that year, she wrote a piece documenting the time machine theory, describing the quote-unquote strange imposing structure and how Howard Webster, an unknown author, tied in the connection of Joseph and Samuel, the quote maverick Victorian genius, end quote, and the fraudster.
Mm-hmm.
Helen noted that the crypt contained the remains of, quote, 3 spinsters about whom almost nothing is known, end
Oh,
quote.
rude.
Which, rude, Helen.
So rude, Helen.
So Howard, the author that she quoted, speculated that Samuel, the inventor, was eager to partner with Joseph due to his extensive knowledge of Egypt and their theories on time travel. And he believes that the 2 preyed on Hannah so that she could fund their research and this project they were going to be doing together.
Yep, sounds plausible, honestly.
Because the key to the crypt has disappeared, no one has been able to enter the crypt for like decades to confirm that the bodies of the women are even still in there. or if they had been buried somewhere else so that the structure could be used to traverse from era to era as originally intended.
Mm.
Since the publication of Helen's article, the story has resurfaced several times since then.
Yep.
The tomb was incorporated on an album cover in 2003 for musician Drew Milholland, and in 2011, historian and musician Stephen Coates from the band Real Tuesday Weld learned about the theory, hypothesizing that it was a transportation chamber instead of a time machine. So he's the one that was like, no, this is a teleportation device. Stephen's theory has morphed into an urban legend.
Of course.
And due to the lack of a key to disprove it, the story persists to this day. The Independent wrote a feature about the mausoleum in 2015, sharing the story of Hannah's great-great-grandson, Ray Godson, who was interested in gaining access to the tomb, not to see if it's a time machine, but instead to pay his respects to his long-dead ancestors, like his...
Yeah, he wants to see if they're still there. I would.
Yeah. Since then, a professional storyteller named Vanessa Wolf has worked with the cemetery's permission to conduct tours of the cemetery, telling the story of Hannah, Joseph, and Samuel to eager legend seekers in the dark of night. The first event that took place in 2015 was a huge success, and several events have taken place since then.
Mm-hmm.
And during an interview, Stephen changed his tune just a little bit, stating that he doesn't believe that the daughters are still interred in the tomb and may instead be buried somewhere else on the property.
Okay.
He also posed the theory that the mausoleum may be the home of a secret subterranean chamber.
Atlantis? Is that what he's...
I don't know, that they're like mole people or something. I don't know.
Okay.
Whether you believe the time machine, teleportation device, or subterranean chamber theories or not, interest in the story has allowed the cemetery to secure funds for a site-wide renovation because a portion of the ticket sales go right back to Brompton. So people
Good.
who take these tours, a portion of the money goes back to the cemetery.
Nice.
Stephen and Arthur Tate, a historian for Brompton Cemetery, are working to find ways to fabricate a replacement key that would allow Hannah's descendants access to her tomb. However, it will be a costly endeavor as it will require an expert artisan to forge a new key without damaging the existing structure. But would opening it kill curiosity in the tale? Virginia believes that part of the allure is not having access.
Yeah.
And she worries that being able to open the tomb will kill interest in the legend. But as of this recording, it hasn't been opened. No key has been crafted, so only time will tell. And that is the story of Hannah Courtoy and the Brompton Cemetery time machine.
Nice. That's a crazy one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wouldn't think of a time machine when I would see that structure.
Some people credit not necessarily her mausoleum, but some other ones that are similar to
the TARDIS.
The TARDIS.
Yep. It does have TARDIS-like features.
We love to hear from you, and there's a couple of ways you can reach out to us. You can email us at yeoldecrimepodcast@gmail.com, where you can send us story ideas, share any spooky stories you may have, fun gifts, or even just to say hello.
You can also reach out to us via snail mail. Remember mail? Our mailing address is Ye Olde Crime Podcast, P.O. Box 341, Wyoming, Minnesota 55092. Fun fact, we like to send out thank you cards with fun stickers you can't get at our shop, so it's worth the cost of a stamp.
Hello, is this thing on? Okay, good. I am sorry to interrupt your listening pleasure, but my name is Tiffany, and I'm here to tell you about my podcast, True Crime Connections. It's an advocacy podcast that talks with real survivors about real shit. This is the place you want to be if you've been in a toxic relationship or anything tragic has happened to you and you're looking to find your strength and healing. No two episodes are alike, but they all give you useful tools that you can take with you. So make sure to find me on your favorite podcast platform, or you can go to truecrimeconnections.com and come join the Hope Building community. See you there.
This week's podcast plug is the True Crime Connections Advocacy Podcast. Join host Tiffany for real-life conversations that explore crimes, trauma, and resilience. Her guests, experts, and survivors alike guide us towards healing. Tune in and be part of the journey every Wednesday. It's part of the Darkcast Network, and we will have a link to her show in the show notes. If you love the show, the best way to support us is to leave a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, Good Pods, CastBox, Podcast Addict, and or Audible. Links to all of these are in our show notes, or if you're already listening on one of these platforms, you know what to do.
Oh, and while you're at it, shoot us a question you'd like to hear us answer on the pod. We'll give you a special shout out and address your burning questions all at the same time. The weirder, the better. Submit them via link in our show notes or shoot them to us in our DMs.
And this week's listener question comes from Carrie Ann.
Okay.
And she would like to know, if you could talk to a dead author, who would it be and what would you ask?
I'd like to find the people that wrote the first Bible and be like, verify your sources. Like which bush? Point at the exact bush and the exact snake. Show me the human remains that are now salt.
Yep.
I don't know. I feel like I would want to do that. Where I'd be like,
do like some investigative journalism on like the people that
where's the
wrote
ayahuasca?
the Bible?
Where's the ayahuasca and the poppy seeds that you smoked while you wrote this out?
Yep.
Because there's every historical text has some sort of fanciful tales, but it would be really nice to finally figure out who those people were and what their mindset was, like where they were in like the caste system, at the time. Just kind of learn more about them to better understand their voice and their point of view when writing that.
Yeah.
I think that would be really cool.
I probably want to talk to Edgar Allan Poe just to be like, what happened to you?
I just thought about that too. I was like, are you going to ask Poe how he died?
What happened?
Do you even know how you died, Edgar?
Yeah. What happened to you?
You okay, bud? Do you need a hug?
I almost said Beatrix Potter. Because, fun fact, like she would go through Brompton Cemetery and look at the headstones, and that's where she came up with a lot of the names of her characters in her stories.
That's funny. She hung out there. She was a girly that regularly attended the garden cemetery, picnicking with her friends.
All right. What's something good you'd like to share?
I don't know. We had a nice family visit over the last week and a half of seeing each other more often. That was really nice. It was nice to see my aunt from Canada. So that'll be my good thing. We got to see him and hang out. How about you?
So I am once again working at the pumpkin patch this year, which is a seasonal job. So it starts on the 14th of September and then it goes through the first weekend in November, just because Halloween's on like a Wednesday this year or something. And you get put on different teams. Like there's, like the grounds crew that like cleans up, and there's the attractions people that
handle like the rides. And
I am on the entertainment crew, which means I get to help out when it comes to blowing the pumpkin cannon.
Oh, fun!
And the candy cannon, which is done at the end of the day. And there's this little like creature. He's not little, it's a dragon. Called like Farfel, pumpkin eating dragon. And there's like a show involved with it. So I get to like help lead the show. And it's not just me. It's like there's other people that are part of it too.
That's fun though.
The best part, I get to be a mascot.
Oh my God, it's what you've always wanted.
It's my dream. So I'll share a picture. He's actually terrifying looking.
Of course.
He's a scarecrow, but then he's got like a jack-o'-lantern head. And he
Ooh,
wears like a little scarecrow hat.
mm-hmm. I can see how that could get creepy real quick.
Yeah, so Pete does not talk.
Mm.
Apparently, he talked one year and it did not go over well.
Oh no!
So he is now silent. He does not talk.
He is a mute.
And he has handlers because apparently you can't see very well out of the head. So the handler does all the talking for Pete. I don't know who the other people are that are part of my team. I met 2 of them at the orientation night, and they are both significantly shorter than myself. So they would not be able to wear the costume.
So you gotta wear the costume.
I gotta wear the costume. And it's like 3 times a day he comes out for like pictures and stuff.
Fun.
So I'm excited.
That's exciting.
My dream of being a mascot is finally being realized. I just had to wait 41 years for it.
There you go. There you go.
All right, shall we?
Mm-hmm.
Want to be social with us? You can see pics from this week's episode, bonus content, and funny memes on X at Ye Olde Crime Pod, or on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, TikTok, and YouTube at Ye Olde Crime Podcast.
Speaking of YouTube, we have a special playlist just for our Can You Crack the Cramp Word segments with our guest podcasters to see who can correctly guess the meaning of some obscure Victorian slang terms. If that's your thing, check it out.
And on that note, as always, I'm Lindsay.
And I'm Madison.
And we'll see you next time with another tale
As old as crime.